The Epstein story has stayed alive in large part because of Donald Trump's hand-picked Attorney General Pam Bondi. She promised for months that some Epstein files were sitting on her desk waiting to be released to the public. But last week, she put out a two-page memo effectively declaring the Epstein case closed, saying there was no client list for her Department of Justice to release, which is convenient given the speculation that Trump might be in the so-called client list. Trump wanted an attorney general who would be his lawyer. Bondi has acted that role in other contexts, firing the prosecutors of the January 6 rioters, purging officials who worked on Trump's criminal cases. On Wednesday, Bondi's DOJ fired Maureen Comey, a veteran federal prosecutor who happens to be the daughter of Trump's nemesis, former FBI Director James Comey. Maureen Comey also, get this, helped prosecute Jeffrey Epstein and his associate, Ghislaine Maxwell. In a farewell email to colleagues, Comey wrote, "If a career prosecutor can be fired without reason, fear may seep in the decisions of those who remain. Do not let that happen. Fear is the tool of a tyrant, wielded to suppress independent thought." Eric Holder served as the Attorney General under President Obama for 6 years, and he currently chairs the National Democratic Redistricting Committee, and he joins me now. It's great to have you on, Mr. Holder, and I wanted to just start with your reaction to the firing of a distinguished line prosecutor, civil servant in Maureen Comey, and as someone who served in the role of Attorney General, to give a context of how much of a sort of violation or abrogation that is of what has been Department of Justice protocol and practice for decades, as far as I can tell.
Well, I think the dismissal of Maureen Comey is a travesty. It's inconsistent with the way in which Justice Departments under Republican as well as Democratic attorneys general have conducted themselves. But what happened to Maureen is consistent, unfortunately, with what has happened to a number of other career prosecutors and FBI agents who, for whatever reason, got on the bad side of this administration. And this administration, this Attorney General, Mr. Beauvais, Todd Blanche, have not had any concern about dismissing people for reasons that are wholly inappropriate and inconsistent with traditions of the Justice Department. And this is going to come to bite them in the butt, because no one now believes that the Justice Department is doing things in a way that is really moored to the truth. And when we're talking about this latest revelation, I think people need to ask themselves, in terms of the release of materials, do you really think that Pam Bondi and the Justice Department are making the determination as to what gets released? Or, because she is the lawyer for Donald Trump as opposed to the American people, or is her client, Donald Trump and the people in the White House, making the ultimate decision? And I think that it is clearly the White House that's making the determination about the release of these materials.
You know, that's such an interesting point I hadn't thought of, that there is a way in which this norm of Department of Justice independence that was quite solid, I think, after Watergate particularly. And there's places where it waxed and waned, the U.S. Attorney scandal under George W. Bush and Alberto Gonzales. But that norm, what you're saying is, in some ways kind of works in both directions. Whereas, like, if it's actually the case that there's independence there, if the Attorney General does something that brings heat, the president plausibly can say, like, I had nothing to do with it, and that could be true. Right. In this case, it's clear to everyone that that's a ludicrous thing for anyone in this administration to ever say about any Department of Justice action.
Right. By having the Justice Department be, as it should be, an independent part of the executive branch, there's an insulation that the White House gets. Because that has been broached here or breached here, anything that is determined to be normally within the confines or the ability of the Attorney General to make, we all know that it is not the Attorney General who's making final calls. It is, in fact, the White House. And that goes to a whole bunch of things with regard to Epstein, with regard to personnel decisions, with regard to positions that the Justice Department is taking in a variety of cases. It's not DOJ that is making the ultimate calls. It's the White House.
I'm going to ask you one more question on Epstein just while we're on it, and then there's a bunch of other things I want to talk about. Just on this last part, I mean, I know it's preposterous. It doesn't even actually make chronological or logical sense. But since you were the Attorney General under Barack Obama, along with Loretta Lynch, Donald Trump saying that Barack Obama created the Epstein files. Yeah. Any reaction to that?
Oh, yeah. All right. All right, that's absurd. I mean, that's fundamentally absurd. And I think that one of the things that we've got to do is make sure, again, consistent with people's privacy interests, and foremost among those being the victims, release all the materials. Just release all the materials, and then everybody can look at them and make determinations as to who placed things in there, who is engaged, who knew Jeffrey Epstein, what was the nature of their relationship. Just let all the stuff out there. They've talked about this for years when they were out of office and talked about all kinds of conspiracy theories. And now that they're in office and have the ability to release this material, they suddenly have decided that they don't want to do that. And when I say they, that's people in the White House.
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff from the Brady room today where Levitt was saying, well, the judges and DOJ, as if like those are obstacles for this administration. Let me ask you about a man that you just mentioned, Emil Bovee, and we were just talking about him with Senator Booker. I mean, this is someone who I think acted in a way at the Department of Justice we've never seen someone act, certainly not in my lifetime, and maybe not since Nixon, and maybe not ever, in terms of how he used the department as a pure tool of the president, seemed to violate court orders, struck this insanely corrupt deal in Eric Adams that led to mass resignation in the office. What does it mean to have this guy as an appellate judge for the country, for the Constitution?
This nomination is a travesty, and people in the Senate who oppose that nomination should do all that they can to make sure that, in fact, he does not get confirmed to a seat on the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. This is a guy who dismissed a case against Eric Adams and, when asked, said, well, it doesn't have anything to do with the facts, doesn't have anything to do with the law, but never, in spite of that, we're going to dismiss the case, obviously for political reasons. He was the hatchet man who came to the Justice Department early on and was responsible for the dismissal of well-intentioned, good, well-serving career prosecutors as well as career FBI agents. Involved also in withholding materials, creating a Brady violation in a case that ultimately had to be dismissed by those great prosecutors in the Southern District of New York. There is nothing in his record, absolutely nothing in his record, that would justify him getting a Court of Appeals slot. There's a ton of things in his record that render this nomination, as I said, a travesty. And I would hope that people in the Senate, I'm not totally conversant with Senate rules, but I would hope that a senator would put a hold on his nomination and make the Republicans do everything that they have to do in order to place him in what is a lifetime appointment. He doesn't deserve it. He does not deserve it.
One of the issues that you've spent a lot of time thinking about working on, as I said in the introduction, is redistricting and gerrymandering particularly. And it could sound sort of obscure, but fundamentally what it means is how democratically representative are state legislatures and the United States Congress. And there's something that's happened this week that is sort of an enormous bombshell in its own way, yet another kind of assault on democratic representation and norms as well, which is that Donald Trump has sort of gotten the governor of Texas to call an emergency session after the deadly flood. Not all the bodies are yet recovered, if I'm not mistaken. Over 150 people have died, still many more missing. To call a special session right after this flood with the aim of doing a mid-decade redistricting to net Republicans 5 more seats. Ohio is considering the same thing as well. What does this mean? What is your reaction to that?
Well, here's the deal. Republicans are concerned that as a result of the terrible things that they have done, that with regard to the budget bill, the way in which they are enforcing the immigration law and snatching people off the streets by men who wear masks, the fact that inflation is ticking up, the assault that we see on the rule of law, they're concerned that they're not going to be able to win the 2026 midterms. And they're afraid of the very people who they say they want to represent. And so what they're doing is to try to come up with ways in which they can rig the system, manipulate the system. And so they're looking at Texas, and they want to draw the lines there in such a way that they think that they can guarantee themselves 5 additional seats for Republicans. This is a closely divided House of Representatives, and they think that, well, let's get some insurance there. And they're going to try to do the same thing in Ohio. The redistricting in mid-cycle in Texas is really kind of uncalled for. We have already been suing Texas for a gerrymandered map that they put in place in the beginning of the decade. They're now going to try to make this even worse, and to do so, especially at the expense of people of color. And the Justice Department has given them a letter that tries to give them cover for what it is that they are trying to do. But at the end of the day, this is not just a Texas story. This is a national story, because if they succeed in rigging the system, you'll end up with a House of Representatives that is not representative of the desires of the American people. We're sick and tired of what this administration has been doing.
Let me ask you this. I've asked you this before. I remember when I asked about sort of partisan gerrymandering versus sort of nonpartisan commissions like they have in some states. I think Iowa is one of them. There's other places as well, where I said, look, that may be the ideal situation, but given the world we live in, don't you have to fight fire with fire? Like, shouldn't California, you can draw a 52-0 Democratic map in California. You can. The math is there. You could probably make it work. Should you do that? I don't know. But at a certain point, it does seem to me like deterrence is important from a game theory perspective here, that if Texas and Ohio are going to do it, then some other states step up to do it as well.
Well, what we have stood for is fairness. And I think that people need to understand that fairness will get us into the place where we should be. Now, yeah, the possibility exists that Texas might consider doing something, but I have to say it is not as easy as people think. There is in place there, by virtue of the Constitution in California, an independent commission that draws the lines. What's happening in Ohio with regard to their redistricting is mandated by their state's constitution. So I think we should try to stop that which Texas is trying to do, try to make the process in Ohio a fair one. And we will sue to the extent that they do something that's inconsistent with the Voting Rights Act or any other statute that we can use. But at the end of the day, I don't think that we're going to have the ability to draw a 52-0 map in California. But I think, again, we fight them to try to stop them from doing it. And then if they do it, we take them to court. And what I would say is, if people want to help us, go to text democracy to 36787 and be engaged in this fight with us. Text democracy 36787 and be a part of this effort.